our series. We are the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority. My name is Kusa Holloway. I will be your host today. And today we have a guest that really needs no introduction. Within the last few years, Wayne has become pretty much a rock star within the Virgin Islands. Everyone knows Wayne Huddleston's name, Mr. Regional Director for SBA. And today we will be talking about the Payment Protection Program, the forgiveness portion of the Payment Protection Program, which is known as PPP. We'll also be talking about the relaunch of the PPP program that just happened in January, and all of the advantages and all the questions that you kind of had burning about the PPP program. So without further ado, Mr. Wayne Huddleston from SBA. How are you doing today, Wayne?
Good. Thank you, Kusa. That's quite an introduction. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And thank you to you and Chanel and everyone at VIEDA for giving us this platform for continuing to provide information on SBA. It's important to get the word out, and we really appreciate your help. I'll go through the presentation today. I intend to not take a lot of time. What we want to do is preserve time at the end to answer your questions. One thing I'll share with both Kusa and Chanel, usually everything works fine, and I usually have a backup with me from SBA just in case it doesn't, but I don't have that backup with me today. So if by chance I get kicked off or something like that, be assured I'll join within a few minutes. It's happened to me a few times on Zoom lately. I don't expect it will happen now, but just in case, just hold tight and I'll be back on in a few minutes. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program. As many of you are aware, during the Christmas holidays, Congress finally acted and got together and passed a new Economic Recovery Act. That act again reauthorized the PPP program, which was very successful here in the Virgin Islands, but it ended August 8th. And that program has been reauthorized with a new deadline of March 31st. I'm going to go through the details of that program, talk about the difference between first and second loans, and then forgiveness a little bit, and then we'll have time for questions. So next slide, please. Oh, actually, two slides. So next slide from there. So over the agenda, just real quickly, I'm just going to overview some key dates, many of which have already passed, but the important one is March 31st. I'm going to talk about first draw loans, what those are, and how to apply, and the differences in the new Recovery Act that were put into PPP. Talk about second draw loans, what those are, how to apply for those, and the differences between first draw. Then we're going to talk about forgiveness, how that process works, how you can apply, and then we'll give you some additional resources and links to get additional questions answered if you have them, and then we'll answer your questions at the end. So next slide, please. So these were some key dates. This presentation was developed less than 2 weeks ago, but already some of those dates have already passed. So we first opened the PPP program on January 8th, and that was open for people who were applying for the first time only and did not take advantage of PPP the first time. It was open to community financial institutions. Then it was open for second draw opportunities with what we call CFIs, community financial institutions. And then on January 15th, it was open to lending institutions with $1 billion or less in assets. And the reasons why we had those phased openings and deadlines to, not deadlines to apply, but opening of apply dates was to try to make sure that these programs reach the smaller banks and the smaller communities that oftentimes feel a little bit shut out of the process when large banks and large communities kind of rush in and take all the funds and go into that. However, on January 19th, the PPP program was open to all lenders and all communities for both the first and second draw applications. Those deadlines have all passed now. So right now you just need to know that it is available to you and you can work with your lenders on PPP, either first or second draw. The important date to know now is March 31st. That is the deadline. Just like August 8th was a deadline in the past, March 31st is a deadline for this new round. It's a much smaller window. That is a deadline for both first and second draws. There is no expectation right now that there will be an additional round of funds beyond PPP. The free money from the government, so to speak, is not going to go on forever. And we hope that we're nearing the end of this pandemic. And so March 31st, there's a slight possibility it could be extended, but I certainly would not bank on that. If you are at all interested in receiving a PPP loan and having that forgiven, you want to apply for that loan well in advance of March 31st. So be sure you remember that date. Next slide, please. So what is a first draw PPP loan? Essentially, that is a PPP loan for anyone who did not receive one prior to August 8th. That would just be your first draw based on your payroll expenditures. There have been some changes. There were some businesses who were ineligible to receive a PPP loan that may be eligible to receive one now. They have expanded some additional entities, which I'll cover in the next slide a little bit later. They've also expanded some eligible expenses that can be used. For those of you who have received a PPP loan in the past, you may recall that 60% of that must be spent on payroll. That 60% is still in effect. However, that 40% allowed you to use it on rent, mortgage interest, and some other minor things in that program. However, with this new round that has been approved by Congress, those expenditures outside of the 60% have been expanded slightly. So if you had a business, for instance, and you tried to stay in business, but you had to move things virtual, and that incurred an expense to you to set up Zoom meetings or equipment or whatever you needed to conduct your business virtually, that can be added in. If you had to purchase a good deal of protective equipment for your employees, that can be added in. So those additional expenses are now expanded in this next round. So if you're getting your first draw or your second draw, those can be included. We still highly suggest that you spend all of the funds on payroll if you can, just for simplicity's sake. You want to make sure that you are able to get approved fully for your forgiveness. But if you need to include some of these expenditures, you may. Borrowers can now select anytime between 8 and 24 weeks after the disbursement of the loan to use those proceeds. Remember before, depending on when you applied, it was either 8 or 24. Now you can select any date within that window to have used all your proceeds and then apply for forgiveness. Some borrowers may request an increase to their original PP loan. I'll get into that just a little bit later. But then again, it's very important everyone remembers that the date is March 31st or until congressional appropriations expire. I don't expect that they will run out of funds before that March 31st date, but you certainly don't want to take any chances because if you recall from the early days in spring, our first offering of PPP, those funds were gone and they disappeared quickly, and then there had to be a new round authorized. So you certainly don't want to delay in getting your application in either on the first or second draw. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the new legislation did allow for some entities who had not received or were unauthorized to receive the PPP loan before to now receive one. It's very limited expansion, but it does apply to some. Housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations that are 501c6, such as a Chamber of Commerce, and some eligible news organizations are now newly eligible to apply for a PPP loan who otherwise before did not have that ability. All the other businesses that were eligible in the previous PPP loan are still eligible. All small business entities, corporations, LLCs, sole proprietorships, nonprofits, veteran organizations, and tribal businesses are all still available to apply for your first draw on a PPP loan. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk about the second draw. This is what is mostly important to people who have already received their first draw and would like to get another round. So there are some changes to the program for the second draw that you must comply with. For most borrowers, the calculation for calculating the maximum loan amount is the same as in the first draw, which is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs between 2000, or you can use early 2020 payroll costs up to 2 million. Before it was up to 10 million. That's been reduced to 2 million now. But the formula is the same, 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs that you can show. Some changes in this next draw are for borrowers in the accommodation or food services industry. We have NAICS code 72, which is essentially restaurants, caterers, those types of things. The maximum draw allowance is higher. Instead of 2.5 times your average monthly salary, restaurants and similar organizations or entities can request a maximum amount of 3.5 times their average monthly payroll costs. Again, up to a max of 2 million, but 3.5 is significantly more than 2.5. So provides a little bit of extra ability to get a larger loan there for restaurant industries. Second law, applicants must submit the form 2483 SD. I'll provide links to those applications later on. Again, you're going to be applying through your lender, not directly through SBA, but there is a separate application for second draw borrowers because there's some difference in the criteria. Next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about some new criteria for second draw loans. So there are some, these are the primary things. The first one, there's basically 3 things that are the big difference between first draw and second draw. If you've already received the first draw, you must have already shown that you have used all those eligible expenses before a PPP second draw can be dispersed. Now, you do not have to have the forgiveness decision already rendered. You can have applied for forgiveness and be waiting on forgiveness, but you must show documentation that you expended those funds from the first PPP draw in the way that they were intended to be expended. Once you can show that, then you can be authorized to receive your second draw loan. Number 2 is you cannot have any more than 300 employees. That doesn't affect a lot of businesses here in Virgin Islands, but it does affect a lot in the States. So good thing to know is that a lot of employers who did receive PPP loans in the past and had 300 or more employees, you don't have to worry about competing with them for these funds in this round. And finally, for the second draw, employers must be able to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So for instance, if first or second quarter of 2019, you showed $100,000 of gross receipts, you'd have to show your same quarter, either the first or second, whichever one you chose to show for 2020, and show at least a 25% reduction in those gross receipts during that time. And they must be the same quarters. You cannot pick one quarter in one year and then another quarter in another year to show that difference. Next slide, please. So again, the important thing with PPP loans is the forgiveness. That's the big difference between PPP and economic injury disaster loans or any other program out there, is that this is a significant loan, but it is forgivable. If you use the funds and show you can use the funds for the intent of the loan, which is to keep people on the payroll, you can have that loan completely forgiven and it essentially becomes a grant. We're not calling it a grant because that's not what it is. It's a loan, but it can be forgiven if you expend it the right way. So you will still apply for that forgiveness, again, not through SBA, through your lender. But there are some changes under the Economic Aid Act on forgiveness that are applied now going forward. The first one is that idle advances are no longer deducted from forgiveness payment. So those of you who also received an economic injury disaster loan and received a advance when that program was operating, you will no longer have that deducted from your amount. So in the past, if someone received a $10,000 advance on their economic injury disaster loan, when they applied for forgiveness, if they had a $100,000 loan under PPP and they expended everything right, instead of having that $100,000 forgiven, it was only $90,000. But now it would be the full $100,000. Forgivable PPP loans are not taxable income. Expenses paid with PPP loans are now tax deductible. You'd work with your IRS for details or your accountant. but that's a change in the Economic Aid Act. There are expanded forgivable expenses. They're permissible for any PPP loan not already forgiven. So in other words, if you received a PPP loan last year during the summer and you've already started that forgiveness process and you've already been forgiven, then that's it. You've already been forgiven of your loan. If you have not started that forgiveness process and you were unable to expend it all or had trouble reaching that 60% threshold for payroll and you needed to dedicate some funds to other things, you can use the expanded forgivable expenses such as the protective equipment, other things you need to purchase to go virtual or other things for your business if you needed that extra room to get forgiveness. That doesn't apply to very many people, but if you fall in that window, just know that you can take advantage of that, even though those weren't the rules originally when you took that PPP loan. And then finally, it says coming soon here, a simplified forgiveness application for PPP loans under $150,000. You may remember in the past, that simplified application was for loans of $50,000 or less. That has been expanded now. That simplified application can be used for loans under $150,000. It says coming soon, but that application is already out, and I will provide a link to that here at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So here is just a very simplified chart that shows if people are wondering which application form you need to fill out, this will show it. So if you received a loan, a PPP loan of $150,000 or less, it's simply the 350-08S, which is posted on our site, and the lenders know to use that form as well. If you was more than $150,000 and meets these other criteria, is self-employed and you have no employees, or you did not reduce hours less than 25%, you would use the EZ form. Everyone else who received a loan, if you're not self-employed, you have a number of employees and took it for more than $150,000, you'll be using the 3508. Again, those forms are posted on our site. All the lenders have those forms, but you'll be applying through your lender. Next slide, please. I'm going to give you an idea of the timeline for forgiveness. The first thing that happens is the borrower submits the application form to the lender, along with any proof of payroll and non-payroll expenses that you are showing for your forgiveness application form. That all goes through the lender. Once you receive it, the lender has 60 days to review it and make a decision on forgiveness. And then they submit that decision to SBA. After that, SBA has 90 days to confirm or deny the forgiveness decision that the lender submitted to SBA. Once that is done, the SBA notifies the lender, not the borrower, and then the borrower, within 5 days of receiving that notification, must notify, the lender must notify the borrower within 5 days of the amount, the SBA review or denial, the remaining balance due if the full amount of the loan was not forgiven, and the balance due date if that's applicable. The borrower then repays the loan on the schedule based on the maturity date of the loan for their particular situation. Again, hopefully most people will not have a remaining balance. You will expend their funds the way they were intended, and you will be approved for forgiveness, and you can just get that fully done. But if there is some left and SBA did not approve, and both lender and SBA did not approve the request for forgiveness, you can make an appeal. That appeal does not extend the deferral period of the loan. So you have a deferral period of up to 10 months beyond after the covered period of your loan. And each covered period is different depending on when that person received their loan funds. But at some point you're gonna have to start paying. You can start that appeal process if you need to. I would recommend starting it early. But if that appeal process takes longer, you still need to start making those payments to the lender. So again, hopefully no one really needs to worry about that. But again, I just want to cover that quickly. Next slide, please. So what to do now? So the very first thing, whether you're trying to receive a PPP loan for the first time or your second draw, is contact your lender. Don't go through SBA. Your lender is going to manage the entire process. So in this slide, I have a link to sba.gov/lender match. That's a link on our site, which links you to lenders not only within the Virgin Islands, but also to lenders across the country who have indicated to us that they are willing to look at deals within the Virgin Islands. However, I strongly urge you, first of all, to work with a lender where you already have an existing relationship. If you are getting a second draw loan, it's certainly much easier to work with the lender who gave you your first draw loan. If you are doing it for the first time, I highly encourage you to look at local lenders, ideally one with which you already have a relationship with. If you don't, then you can pick from 6 different lenders within a territory: Popular, First Bank, Oriental, Merchants, Bank of St. Croix, and a Virgin Islands Economic Development Bank. All 6 of those banks did a fantastic job of processing PPP loans for businesses within the territory. Over 90% of all PPP loans that were processed and approved were processed by one of those 6 lenders. I can tell you personally that they spent a lot of late nights and weekends working hard to make sure that those loans were processed. Several of those lenders had never even done SBA loans before, so they were learning a new process, but they did a fantastic job. And you certainly want to work with lenders that you can pick up the phone and talk to personally and know. If you don't have a relationship with a local lender and you have one already with a stateside lender, you can, of course, use them as well. There are approximately 25 to 30 lenders outside the territory who provided PPP loans in the first round to Virgin Island businesses. Some of the major names you already know, some of the fintech ones, the ones that operate primarily online, such as Cabbage and a few others. But again, work with the local lenders. That's going to be your best bet. You can get more information on our website, sba.gov/PPP. We provide the most up-to-date information on our site, links to applications, links to frequently asked questions, all sorts of things. Basically, everything you need to know about PPP can be gleaned from our site. Highly encourage you, before you call me or before you call your lender with a question, oftentimes those questions can be answered on our site, either through our FAQ documents, or if you just want to, if you have a more detailed question, you can read through the rules and laws as they were passed by the government. It's a little bit more in-depth reading, but it's all there on our site for you to look at. If you need additional resources, we have a large resource provider, the Small Business Development Center here in the territory. Their information is on our site. You can go, especially if you're listening to this presentation and you're not in the Virgin Islands, sometimes we get some outside people. You can go to sba.gov/local assistance and get information on the community wherever you are. It'll give information on the district office plus the other resource partners. You can also subscribe to our updates. We'll send out updates regularly by email if you wish. And you can also follow us on Twitter. There's sba.gov, which is the general Twitter account, and I'll provide the one for our local district office in an upcoming slide. So next slide, please. And then finally, I'm trying to give as many links as possible to the most pertinent documents regarding PPP. So here, after the new year, many new documents were released regarding the new authorization under Economic Recovery Act. There's a top line overview of first draw PPP loans, which is I think it's a 2 or 3 page document, just very basic information, much of which I've covered in this presentation. There's a top line overview for second draw PPP loans. There's information on how to calculate your loan amounts for the first draw, and the same, there's another document for the second draw as well. If you want to get more into the details of all the rules that govern the program, what we call interim final rule 1 and interim final rule 2 regarding these programs as they were passed by Congress and developed by the Department of Treasury and SBA, are all in these documents. They're a little bit more wordy, a lot of government speak, but it's all there. Also, the updated application forms are there. Those were released on January 8th for both the first draw and the second draw. And again, as I mentioned, there are new forgiveness forms that were just released last week. The new 3508S for loans of $150,000 or less, forgiveness for the easy forms if you're a sole proprietor, and then forgiveness forms for everyone else. Again, you'll be doing these through your lender. Excuse me. One thing I'll note is that in these instruction forms for loan forgiveness and in your applications, your lender may be consolidating that information into an application, online application that they have done themselves. So it may not look exactly the same as you start applying through the lender, but they will cover all that information in these forms. So next slide, please. And then finally, here is our information for local assistance through SBA. We don't have a separate website for Virgin Islands, but we work in conjunction with the Puerto Rico office. We're basically one large office between Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. You can visit our site there. You can get updates from our Twitter account if you use Twitter through SBA_Puerto Rico. My information is there. The office line is a Puerto Rico area code. However, that rings here in my office in St. Croix. I'm not always in my office, however, but my cell phone I typically always have with me. I'm not frequently I'm in meetings or doing a presentation such as this or on a call, so I can't always answer when you call, but if you leave me a voicemail, I will certainly be able to respond within 24 to 48 hours. However, I believe the best way to get in touch with me if you have a question is email. Please shoot me an email at wayne.huddleston@sba.gov. That way I'll have a record of it. I come back to it, and then it makes it a lot easier if I'm referring you to some additional assistance. I can just forward that on via email. In addition to SBA, of course, I can give you information on SBA's programs specifically, PPP, economic injury, a few other programs. But we have our resource partner, the Small Business Development Center here in the Virgin Islands. It is hosted by UVI, but they have office locations out in the community on both St. Croix and in St. Thomas. The information is provided below, contact number. They have business counselors on staff that can provide you one-on-one assistance, ongoing assistance for any needs you have with your business, whether it's PPP, economic injury disaster loan, anything related to SBA, but also lots of other questions or concerns you may have with your business and trying to access capital, trying to grow your business, whatever you need, or just developing your business plan. They have a great deal of resources at the SBDC, plus very well-trained business counselors that can help you. And you can also email them there at info@viSBDC.org. So next slide, please. So finally, if you have a few moments, we love to have your feedback, sba.gov/feedback. There's just a few questions there. We'd like to know if this information we're providing is pertinent and helpful for you. We'd love to get your feedback, so please let us know. With that, though, I think the last slide is just to answer your questions. Before we open up to questions, however, I do want to preface it. I cannot give you detailed information on how to submit your application. I cannot tell you which lender to go to or give you advice on how to show your expenses. Those are things you may want to talk to your lender about or you're an accountant about. But I can give you overall general information on the programs and answer most questions that you have regarding that. So with that, I'll stop talking and open it up to questions.
Wayne, thank you so much for the for that presentation. And there's a lot of information that you provided, a lot of pertinent information as we go forward with PPP, because there was a lot of misinformation, changing fluid information as the PPP program was going through last spring into the summer. And then now, of course, we have the second rollout of the PPP for individuals who, who may not have been able to take advantage. And then also too, it's not only who weren't able to take advantage, but then now who's navigating how to go about the forgiveness portion of the PPP loans. And I know we have some questions here in the chat. I didn't say this before, but if you do have a question, please place it in our chat room and we will get to it once we have time allotted. So our first question is, someone had a question about if this information will be available after. Yes, it is. It is being recorded and it will be loaded up onto our website, which is usvi.gov. ppeda.org, and you can see the presentation in whole, and you can show it to anyone who you think it might be of assistance to as well, and also the PowerPoint presentation. Someone had a question: if a lender or another SBA approved organization is assisting in processing PPP applications, if they need to hire an extra individual on contract to assist in this effort, can the SBA pay for their specific services? Example, loan processing. Has that been done before?
Yeah, there is a provision. I don't recall the exact details, but for lenders, if you are using what we call oftentimes lender service providers, those charge fees to process loans for SBA related loans. There is a provision that allows those fees to be reimbursed. I would look on our site. We have the same area, sba.gov/PPP. We have information for borrowers, and then we have a separate section that is information for lenders. And there's an FAQ document as well that covers that, and it will give the exact terms of that agreement. So yes, but I just don't know the exact terms, but you can find them on our site.
Okay. Someone asked, my business received a 50% payroll tax credit. Can we now apply for a first-time PPP loan?
I do not believe a tax credit affects your ability to apply for a PPP loan. It's pretty straightforward. So if you can just show what your payroll was before, and if you've been affected by the pandemic and just answered a few certifications during application, you should be able to apply for a first draw PPP loan as long as you're an eligible business. Most businesses are eligible. And as again, we expanded that list slightly, but I would look at it. It shouldn't have any bearing on your ability to apply, even though you receive the payroll tax credit.
What about if a business has independent contractors and you're paying your independent contractors? Can that be counted as payroll?
Independent contractors cannot be counted as payroll. Independent contractors have the ability to apply for a PPP loan on their own. So they cannot be double counted. So an independent contractor oftentimes works with for multiple entities. And so it's much simpler for them to apply and show all their income during that year than to rely on all their multiple entities to try to count them. So if you have independent contractors, you cannot count them as payroll. They have their own way of getting the PPP loan themselves.
Okay. And of course, if someone has never applied for a PPP loan again, this would be the opportune time for them to do so, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
It's certainly right now, but certainly before March 31st, because then the program goes away.
Someone was asking in regards to the bank online system, it automatically calculates at the 2.5% rate. How do you go about getting the 3.5% rate? Is that something that they have to call in and get done, or is that an automatic update from SBA?
We wouldn't, the lender does all that and they do the request for the amount. We're dealing with a high volume of SBA to approve lenders from thousands of lenders from all across the country doing each thousands of loans. The lender should calculate that. So if they're online, if they have an online form that they're automatically calculating using 2.5, and you are in the restaurant industry and you can show that you are by the NAICS code that you have, then you should contact that lender. I don't know if you have a phone number for them or what, but you should tell them you need to have that 3.5 calculation as an option for you. But you would have to work through the lender on that.
Is there any, in the first round of the PPP, your business had to be established by February of 2020. Is there any stipulations now with when a business was started that they can participate in the PPP loan program? Or is it still the same date of February of 2020?
That's still in February 2020. So if you started your business in March of 2020, then there is no opportunity for a PPP loan.
Okay, so then you started after the pandemic.
Correct.
Okay, so basically anyone who started their business within the last 9-10 months or so, they would be ineligible to apply for a PPP loan, correct?
Correct. So so it was, The whole intent of the program is to help businesses who were existing and negatively affected by the pandemic. If you were able to start during a pandemic, then good for you, but there are not PPP loans available to help with that.
Okay. Someone is asking, is a good standing certificate required for the PPP loan forgiveness application? Is a good standing certificate required with the second draw application?
Good standing with your local, I think I don't know that in SBA we're asking for the good standing certificate. Local lender might be asking for it. But it's not a requirement from SBA for a good standing certificate. But if your lender's requiring it, then you should do it. So, or find another lender if you don't like it. But everyone should have a good standing certificate, ideally. But certainly there's understanding those certificates may be managed differently from county to county, state to state, territory to territory. So submit it if you can. If you can't and there's some issue, work with your lender or find a different lender.
And someone is asking, the new rules say the loan amount is not income. Expenses can subtract expenses paid. Does that apply to the first PPP loan too?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
all the new rules that were passed under the Economic Act revise can be applied to the PPP, the original PPP loan as well.
Okay. So far, that's all the questions I have on the chat. Maybe we can switch to Chanel. Chanel, do we have any questions from the Facebook group? I'll wait for Chanel to check. But we do have one more question. Someone wanted to know, if you have more than one business, can you submit one application for all 3 businesses, or do you have to do them separately?
I would do those separately. So it's per tax ID. So you'll want to do a separate application for each business.
Okay. And one of the things you saw was, as we know with the last PPP, we had a rush of the bigger businesses, rush to get the money. A lot of the small business companies were not, able to get in. And so here comes the second part. And we know we had a really small window for small businesses to go in and apply before everyone else is. Are there still more safeguards? I saw that in the presentation. It says, companies that are over 300 employees, they're not allowed to apply for the second drawdown of the PPP. What other pertinent or key indicators were added so that way our truly small businesses, the mom and pops who are just 2 employees or 1 employee, are really going to be able to get to this money?
Yes, there were a few set-asides that were approved by Congress with the release of PPP. I didn't go in through the set-asides primarily because I expect that we're not going to have an issue of running out of funds this time. But if we do, there are certain set-asides that protect communities like the Virgin Islands. I forget the exact amount. It might be 15 billion or maybe it's 30 billion. I can't remember, but there are set-asides for communities that are have lower income. The Virgin Islands is a hub zone, which is a historically underutilized business zone, identified through high levels of unemployment, lower levels of income, majority minority communities. There are set-asides within this legislation that ensures that if the funds are very popular and many other businesses apply, that they cannot touch those set-asides for those communities. Now, those communities can expend those funds as well, but we expect that there will be plenty of funds available to Virgin Islanders that larger businesses and those in more wealthy communities won't be able to touch.
And what about our farmers? What about our independent contractors, our farmers, our hairstylists, our barbers, our landscapers, those individuals who kind of work for themselves? They're their only employees. That is it. Is there a big push for them? And first of all, would they be eligible for the second round of PPP loans? And what are we doing to make sure that they get in this time and get the financing that they need, because those are critical services that we need within the territory or just throughout the nation.
Yes, there are many businesses within the Virgin Islands that were sole proprietorships, mom and pop shops, sole employers, just people employing themselves, independent contractors, taxi drivers, so forth, that applied for PPP and were approved. We had over 2,000 businesses in the Virgin Islands that were approved for PPP. Many of those were just sole proprietors and independent contractors. Those can all apply again for a second round of funding. It's important, though, one of the biggest obstacle to independent contractors and sole proprietors was their ability to show their income in the previous years. So oftentimes business owners like to try to avoid taxation as much as possible, and will sometimes report that they did not make nearly as much money as they actually made. And you do that at your own peril when a program like this comes up, because the federal government has to look at what you made as an independent contractor, and that is considered your salary. So if you didn't put down very much previous years, then your opportunity to receive a loan is severely diminished. But yes, independent contractors, all small mom and pop shops, are highly encouraged to apply. They're available to them just like every other business.
Thank you. And I know we're only talking about PPP right now, but I know we had the other program, which was the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Has there been any extensions to that program as far as date and funding?
Yes, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan was extended. So for those of you who may recall, prior to the end of the year, the deadline was December 31st. With this congressional legislation, that was extended for an additional year. So you can apply for that all throughout 2021. You can apply for an Economic Injury Disaster Loan under the COVID-19 Disaster Declaration. However, if you've already received a loan, then that's it. There is only one loan per business under that program. But any business that had not already applied or received that loan and wishes to over the year, there are many businesses who are still suffering and maybe thought in 2020 they didn't want to take on that debt and didn't need the loan. But now as we go on and through 2021 and there's still a lot of negative economic impacts, they're still eligible to apply. You can do both. You can get both PPP and an economic injury disaster loan. PPP is done through your lender. An economic injury disaster loan is directly through SBA on our site. You can go to sba.gov /EIDL and get all the information on an economic injury disaster loan. And then there is a link on that site to apply online, and that will be done directly through SBA.
Okay. And we'll check back in with Chanel just to see if there's any questions from Facebook. I have another question in the chat. Can you apply for both the PPP and the economic injury disaster loan concurrently?
Yes, you can. You can do both. In fact, a lot of businesses have done that here in the Virgin Islands. And one thing about the economic injury disaster loan, again, that is a loan and that is not forgivable. PPP is. But if you think you might need those extra funds under an economic injury disaster loan, I highly encourage you to apply. The terms are very nice, 3.75% interest rate, 2.75% if you're a nonprofit, and they're stretched over 30 years. And you don't have to start paying for a year after you receive your loan. So a lot of businesses are getting approved for those loans, receiving the funds, setting them in an account. And if 6 to 9 months later, they realize they don't really need those funds and would prefer not to carry that debt, they can pay that directly to SBA in addition to the small amount of interest that was charged during that time, and not have to carry that debt and not have to worry about it. Many businesses believe it is well worth the small fee of the low interest during that time to have money in hand and have that ability to tap into it if they need it. And if they don't need it, they can just submit it back. There's no fee for paying off early on those loans.
Okay. And as you're talking about the loans and payment amounts and things like that, The question that I had was in regards to the PPP with, well, the first question is, for people who currently have disaster SBA loans stemming from the storms, has their grace period been extended now? Because I know the grace period had been extended to January of 2021. But due to the length of the pandemic so far, has it been extended any further?
Yes, those were extended as well. I believe those were also extended to March 31st. If you have an existing disaster loan, you shouldn't need to make any payments until that date. It may be extended again, but again, right now it's just a few more months. There's also a loan program called SBA Debt Relief. So if you have an existing non-disaster SBA loan, so what we call a 7A loan or a 504 loan that was issued through a bank, but that was guaranteed by SBA, SBA provides a certain amount of time of debt relief where SBA will make those payments. And perhaps later, and I will probably be scheduling some more webinars in the coming weeks where I'll talk a little bit less about PPP and just give a basic overview, but talk more about these EIDL programs, debt relief, disaster loans, and others to answer questions as well. I couldn't fit it all in today. I want to focus strictly on PPP since that's the hot topic. But yes, thanks for bringing those up. Those are extra provisions in the Act that help businesses with SBA loans.
Yes, and so my final question, and we had no questions from Facebook. That means that you're doing a really good job today, Wayne, which you always do. So my final question as we look to wrap up is, for individuals who took out a PPP loan and now they're going back a second time for another PPP loan, and you said that they don't have to do another application, they just have to fill out maybe a form of some sort. Can you kind of just walk us through that that process just for a little bit more clarity?
They will have to fill out another application. So if they submitted for a PPP loan, and I think let me know if I didn't get your question right, but if they submitted for an original PPP loan and received that loan, and now they're trying to go for their second draw of a loan, it's a whole new application form. Because there's a little bit different requirements. It's very similar to the first application form, but it adds some different requirements that must be shown, such as the 25% reduction in payroll to show that and also evidence to show that you've used the funds from the previous loan effectively, but it's a separate application.
Okay. Perfect. So if no one has any other questions,
it looks like, Fusa, good morning. We have a question that came in that may not.
Is that the one about the good standing?
Applying for PPP and EIDL concurrently.
Yes, we did ask about that, and Wynn said yes, you could.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, we did. We did ask that one. So if there's no further questions, because we're coming up on the 50-minute mark, we want to thank Mr. Wayne Huddleston for being with us today. And we would like to thank all of our participants for hanging with us for 50 minutes, talking about all the intricacies of the PPP program. And please reach out to Mr. Huddleston through his email. I can testify that is usually the best way to reach him, and he's pretty quick about replying. But please, the funding is there to help you with your business. Please do not let this opportunity pass you by. Also know that the SBDC, which is a Small Business Development Center, is always there to help you if you're unfamiliar or you're kind of scared of the paperwork that may be involved to do this. They can help walk you through that program. Also, the Virgin Islands Economic Development Bank, headed by Ms. Monique Samuel, we are there as well to assist. We are actually an approved lender of the PPP program. We're an approved SBA lender. So we are also here as an option to assist you through this program. Our main goal is to definitely hold on to the businesses that we have within the territory and locate ways and avenues to make sure that you stay in business, you keep your employees, and that you are here once the pandemic is over. So we thank you all for being here with us today and taking the time. This webinar is going to be recorded and up on our website within the next few days, hopefully before the end of the week, along with the slide presentation, so you can review information. And of course, if you have questions that we were not able to answer today, or something that you thought of maybe after, you can always email us at info@usvieda.org, and we will definitely be able to answer your question or pass it on to Wayne or someone at SBDC for an answer. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having everyone today. Please stay safe, and we'll see everyone next time on VIEDA Wednesday webinars.